Those who face eternity easily forget what a lifetime means, what an ending means.
You know it doesn't have to be this way.
No, Kunavang, it does. They need me.
Welcome to End of Dragons Daily 50. This is a back and forth show in which we discuss all the fun stuff going on with Guild Wars and particularly the future, the expansion End of Dragons. If you at any point have any ideas for a comment and you want to drop it down below, go ahead, give it a chance. You might appear in the next episode. Today we're going to be talking a lot about the new patch. As I actually make this video, I've done a stream on it. We did about 4 hours of discussion already, but I haven't made any YouTube videos yet, so it's kind of a little bit weird. I know some of you guys might be waiting for my take and my speculation in a main format. We'll get to that soon, but a lot of you guys have things to say about the expansion, pretty much being informed by the most recent patch, so let's run through with that and we'll see what we've got. I got a couple of miscellaneous things in here as well, like this, for example. Somebody just posted a comment a few hours ago on a Guild Wars 2 Daily video. So this show that you're watching right now is inspired by an older series, Guild Wars 2 Daily, I did like a decade ago. Not quite a decade actually, but a long time ago. And apparently back then, I did like spotlight videos, just like I do now. Check that out. I did a Tengu race spotlight. I haven't watched this. I can't even remember what I would have said in that. It's a weird one, but somebody says, I'm here from the future, still can't play as the Tengu in 2021, lol. Well, you never know. By the end of 2021, you may indeed be able to. One of the big things about this new patch is that they've introduced a pretty tangible, new, youthful, young character that is interested in collaboration with the outside world, who does have access within the Dominion. We hear a little bit about what's going on in there. I really do think these are setups for the X-Pack, and I think that as of the new patch, the chance that this expansion will deal with the Dominion of Winds has gone up massively. Like, massively. In fact, I think it's 100% chance that this next... well, okay, I should never say 100. I think I'm like 90% confident that the expansion will deal with the Tengu of Winds. Whether that also then means we're going to get a new playable race and all of that kind of stuff, well, that's a little bit different, a little bit harder to say. But as you guys know, I'm all pretty optimistic about that idea too. Anyway, first one here comes from RK Cuddles, who says, we were set up. Something greater than the Elder Dragons and the human gods brought humans to Tyria to make us fight the other races and the dragons. In End of Dragons, we will become aware of this threat. The dragons who are actually enslaved and forced to be evil will sacrifice themselves to empower each remaining race so we can finally face off against the threat. Now, I don't know, this might be a joke comment, and you might actually just be referencing some other fantasy, some other series that I don't know about, but there are some things to dig in here. Basically, as silly as this sounds, or might read to some of you guys might be wholeheartedly for it. This is kind of displayed out here in kind of a clean way, what the franchise has always been doing. This is how we go from the White Mantle, who it turns out were being manipulated by the Massat, who as it turns out could be trumped by the Titans, who as it turns out just came from Abaddon, the big bad guy, who as it turns out can be eclipsed by the Elder Dragons, who as it now turns out were not evil, they were being forced to be evil, blah 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 blah. You know, that last step almost doesn't look out of the pattern. I mean, it is completely to be expected in a certain degree. I really don't want to see this. Also, I just want to say, the humans were brought by the gods to Tyria, not something greater. The gods did it. And in fact, for all the failings and inconsistent and waffliness of the library scene in Path of Fire, there's so much waffly lately. But as waffly as it was, they did at least give us pretty clear... actually, it wasn't the library scene, was it? I think it was one of the lore books in POF, those voice-acted lore books, which were amazing, by the way, and I'd love to see in the new X-Pack. They did explain pretty clearly that the gods have gone to find another world. Like, they're still doing this. They're still looking for paradises or building paradises or whatever. That is kind of, like, pretty clearly laid out in some of the newest storylines. So they're very clear about that. The idea that there's some great manipulator beyond it all, and maybe it ties into Zoteka and the Utopia storylines, I don't know. To those of you wondering what the hell Zoteka is, it was the story that was going to be the 4th campaign for Guild Wars 1 before it got cancelled and turned into Guild Wars 2. And many of us thought that was never going to be canon or real, but just last year, the devs came out with a bunch of new lore information about Zoteka, talking about it in like an almost canon way. It was really crazy. I did some videos on it. Definitely check it out. Just type WoodenPotatoes Utopia Guild Wars 2 or something in YouTube search and it will come up. up, or, you know, if I was a better YouTuber, I'd probably link it to you directly, but I'm not a better YouTuber. Next, we've got Kirka87, who says, this isn't necessarily End of Dragons related, but what do you think of your past self playing Guild Wars 1 without Guild Wars 2 ever having been announced? Would think if you went back in time with the knowledge of what Guild Wars 2 is today and told them all about it, would they be happy with where the franchise has gone, or do you think they'd feel let down in some way? You know, it's funny, I actually grabbed this comment thinking you were not talking about me going back in time to talk to myself, but going back in time to tell the devs where the game went. And I suppose either way you cut it, I think about this all the time. This is an amazing question. I love this question. I really do consider this always. So going back in time and telling myself, it's a little bit complicated on this one because, you know, I've built a life out of this game at this point. You know, I made this YouTube channel and I'm constantly thinking about this game, not just playing it, but I'm looking at the news about it. I know things about the devs. I've been to the studio. You know, I know a lot about it. And so to go back and talk to my past self would be to include all that stuff. And obviously he'd be thrilled and giddy and interested in all of that stuff. So it's kind of hard to break down and figure out where the line is. I mean, in a weird way, I'm even in the game now with the Maguma Berlin stuff. You know, that would be unbelievably cool. The big elephant in the room for this discussion, whether I was back in time talking to myself or talking to the devs, is that Guild Wars 2 is so different from Guild Wars 1. And, you know, it's not that Guild Wars 1 was a perfect game and Guild Wars 2 has to be like Guild Wars 1. But the sequel has ended up, I think, in a place that no one would have predicted at all. And I think it's still in a good, healthy place in terms of being an entertaining, well-polished product, you know, particularly compared to other MMOs where, you know, bad MMOs are really terrible and very ill-principled, especially with monetization and stuff. And I think ArenaNet has stayed extremely true. In terms of, like, business model and stuff, it's very, very similar to Guild Wars 1 in a lot of ways. And for value for money and all of those things, I think we're still in the same place. But everything about it feels super different. So, again, it's not that that's necessarily bad, but if I was going back in time and talking to myself, my expectation was something in line with Guild Wars 1. I mean, I knew it was going to be different. They always told us it was going to be different because it was a full-fledged MMO. But you still had that certain underlying. Guild Wars 2 is nothing like it anymore, and maybe there's a chance that I really wouldn't like that. Like, as I speak into the microphone today, I miss the Guild Wars 1 format. I miss that experience. I miss that kind of deck building. I miss that kind of combat. I miss those kinds of instances and the way the end game was structured. I miss that clean world where there was no microtransaction store and all of that stuff. I miss it. Guild Wars 2 doesn't satisfy it. The entire gaming industry doesn't satisfy it. You ask if I'm let down in some way? I am let down in exactly that way. It's something that ArenaNet could still solve if they decided to reimagine and bring out a new game, a new product that looks at the principles that Guild Wars 1 was so good at. I mean, we've seen no signs that that's what they're doing. We just had that big expose, shall we say, on some of the behind-the-scenes stuff that was going on at the company. And it doesn't really look like maybe they had those ambitions. I mean, who's to say what the Generation project was or whatever. As far as ArenaNet actually making something that feels like Guild Wars 1 sometime in the future, I think that chance gets smaller and smaller and smaller as the proportion of devs there are newer, younger people who are not attached to that game in any way, and the older people forget what it was to build a game like that, or even just outright leave. But hey, maybe there's no money in the idea anyway, and what I'm essentially doing is rambling. The other kind of fantasy I often have, this is so sad, isn't it? But I love the idea of going back to like 2011 right now. You know, 2011 is a year in which a shit ton of Guild Wars 2 was already made, right? Like, you can't reverse directions on a lot of stuff at that point, but you can avoid certain pitfalls, and certainly like all the Living World Season 1 and expansion structure and stuff that they did later, you can avoid those pitfalls. And I love the idea of going back right then and there with a hard drive, and on the hard drive is Guild Wars 2. And, you know, I've stolen a copy of, I can run a server or something, and I just let the whole studio in 2011, those devs, play everything. And they spend literally like 6 months experiencing the entire story, all the living world, all the expansions, all the endgame content. They all play it all. Right up to now, just before End of Dragons. And then you see what they do. I don't think I'd have to editorialize in any way. I wouldn't then have to sit them down and say, oh, don't do this, don't do that. I mean, I could teach them about community controversies and stuff like that. But just let them see what their product became. And then see where they go with it, see what lessons they learn, take it away from them again, and see how that changes Guild Wars 2's development in the future. Would they absolutely love everything they saw and do it all exactly the same again, or would they find wriggles? And it's funny because even in a situation like that, we could talk about this all day, and I'm going to try not to. In a situation like that, they still wouldn't really get a great sense for like what the economy did over the years, what issues there were there. They wouldn't really know whether their game had been successful or whatever. I wouldn't necessarily tell them how many copies they sold or how big they got and stuff like that. Maybe they'd have to figure that out for themselves. It's a really fun idea, and thought experiment as to what that would do. Maybe, in one world, you give them it all to play and you tell them it was the best game ever. And in the other world, you give them it all to play and you tell them that actually sales haven't been climbing and, you had all these layoffs and blah, 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 blah. And then you see what happens with that. I'm going to stop myself there, but brilliant question. I'd love to hear what you guys think on this. The main thing I want to be clear with my idea there is I would still trust their expertise over my own. I think all ArenaNet really needed to see was long-term what their design decisions morphed the game into. And then they get hindsight to know where that leads them. And they could decide sort of a bit earlier what they want to reverse on or not. One guy video man says, I just played through the Caledon Forest Tengu Dragon Response mission, and the first thing I thought was Karnak is back. Also, the characters are fun and hint at a potential Dominion of Winds / Tengu interaction in the future. End of Dragons, anyone? Hopefully this breadcrumbing the idea that the Dominion of Winds may be explorable in End of Dragons or a Living World episode map like they did with Corner. The crazy part is that I think Matt Mercer is the new voice of Karnak. While this may not mean much to some people, Matt Mercer is a fantastic voice actor, the voice of McCree in Overwatch and GM on Critical Role, and is a great person to pass the torch on to from John DiMaggio. Well, listen, Matt Mercer has actually been doing voice acting for this game for a long time. I believe he's the non-male voice actor. He's been there for ages, and yeah, I did hear about this. I think that his voice for Karnak sounds fine. And Karnak is not my favourite character anymore. He used to be edgier. Now he's just kind of this sort of smug, snarky, almost comic relief Sylvari. And, he has a role to play and I enjoy it, but he's definitely not as cool as he once was. I'm just glad to see the characters back, that they did this recasting. It's funny to me that they didn't really provide any real detail, unless I maybe missed it somewhere on the official forums. The devs didn't explain we're recasting this character. They used to do blog posts about recasts. And what you guys have got to remember is John's wife was the female Char. And when she left, they did a whole blog post about how she was being replaced. They never explained why she left or whatever. But then around the same time was when Karnak disappeared. So it seems that there was probably some drama back there. And he doesn't want to work for this game anymore after, his wife's not working for this game anymore. Who knows why, and they're just being quiet about it. People have noticed, and, I think it's fine. I just care mostly about the characters and about the world, and Karnak's back. Hopefully they've got good plans for him. Seeing Karnak explore the Echovald Forest, that's pretty high on my list of things I want to see, particularly if they confirm some kind of Warden / Sylvari connection. They might also go the other way, where they basically say, oh, the Wardens are like the Sylvari, but not the Sylvari, and there isn't a pale tree down there. But the idea that there's another pale tree in the Echovald Forest, you've got to have Karnak there, right? In fact, let's get some more of the Firstborn, not just Kate. Let's get some of the other ones. I really think a lot of people have a stake in this story. And don't forget, guys, there's still 2 Firstborn missing. Kind of tread on the toes of a Guild Wars 2 mystery video I want to do later, but there you go. Singer says, this patch's story gives me the impression that the narrative team has lost the plot. There's no consistency left, and the stuff with Bram directly contradicts what we were saying Bangar couldn't do with Jormag. Not to mention, everyone is still talking about killing dragons without considering the fallout. Even if no dragons die, the fact that none of the characters are bringing up dragon replacements, the all, etc., while we set up a kaiju fight baffles me. I don't believe patch 4 could possibly address all these lore / plot holes. As of now, they've thrown up a build-up of Season 4 through Season 3 through Season 4 out of the window. Okay, I don't think the narrative team has lost the plot. I just think that when it gets to the big, serious topics, I used the phrase waffly earlier, I'll stick with that. I think everything's hazy, everything's too ill-defined, and I think ArenaNet have left things that way so that they can manipulate the pieces comfortably, and it leaves the whole experience feeling a little bit hollow. There's a lot to talk about here, but to be specific about some of your ideas. First of all, Bram can direct Primordus, not control, you'll notice, but direct Primordus because the method he's using is different to what happened with Banger. Banger was just picked out and basically made a thrall. He is a voice and he is a thrall, and so obviously he has no control, while Bram's doing something kind of very specific, aided by the spirits of the wild, and so there is a little bit of control, and there is precedent for control being possible. Hell, you read Edge of Destiny, what exactly was Snaf trying to do with Kralkatorrik back then? So I don't actually see any real contradictions there. However, this whole idea of oblivion and the destruction of the entire world if the Elder Dragons die and so on, yes, this is really weird and baffling to see, and I really think that what the game is missing is a little bit of dialogue with Aurene in which she expresses, and this really should have happened with the Aurene/Bram scene, in which she expresses that she thinks she can contain all of this power once these dragons are off the table. That she is the only replacement necessary because she is the prismatic dragon. She has not gone mad, like with the same powers that Kralkatorrik had. Kralkatorrik had the same mix and he went mental, and at the end of season 4 he basically said to Aurene, you can have this and you won't go crazy. And it's true, she's got that, she's an Elder Dragon and she's not crazy. And so the idea is she is special among them. And so she can take this Jormag stuff, she can take this Primordial stuff, she can control it, no oblivion. And that does work, that is consistent with the lore, that's all there. The problem is, the devs haven't given what I just said screen time. And so, yes, it feels like there's just this huge, baffling, waffly story going on where we have to assume stuff is going on all the time. We have to assume that Aurene knows this is okay because of her prophetic powers or whatever. Like, it's a really, really hard story beat to swallow. Extremely hard, particularly on the part of Aurene, because the devs haven't had the time to put all this really crucial dialogue in there. And there's so much crucial dialogue that has to be in there now because the game is so expansive and complicated and there's so many beats to go through. And unfortunately, I think they did drop the ball a little bit on some of this stuff. Maybe I'm wrong. If somebody want to give me an argument for why I'm wrong. Vino Pew says, getting really burnt out with Dragon response missions. The formula is exhausting. Rescue hostages, kill mobs, do escort, wipe out waves of enemies, fight a champion, GG. I'm most excited for this last release of Champions because I know it'll be the end of the Icebrood saga and it'll pave a way towards the end of Dragons. Do you think they'll have a live stream to announce the expansion or just a trailer release and blog post? Well, there was something of an interview that kind of suggested when the Icebrood saga ends, it won't lead directly into End of Dragons. Now, this is new to me, and if I get more information out of it, I might end up doing a dedicated video. But it sounds like there might be some interim content on the way, and that will lead into End of Dragons, and Icebrood saga is going to try and conclude on its own, which means a ton of things, really. But that is a bit worrying because it means there might not really be much to be looking forward to at the end of the Icebrood saga at all in terms of End of Dragons, which kind of sucks. Going to your point about getting burned out, look, people compliment Guild Wars 2's combat all the time, and I think they're wrong to do it. I think they're wrong to do it because Dragon response missions should be fun. Because what Dragon response missions mostly are is just Guild Wars 2 combat. You literally just said in your message, you are exhausted killing enemies. Kill mobs, kill waves of enemies. That shouldn't be exhausting. If the combat is fun, that should be fun. I've had a long-term belief that ArenaNet don't need to do a massive song and dance in every single Living World release and like little chapter just to keep you entertained. But now, you know, I'm beginning to think maybe I'm wrong. Maybe people don't like the combat as much as they think they do, and they're confusing that with what they actually experience as a fluid, well-polished experience. And really, what they want is new exploration into new areas, and they want to interact with all these other systems like you get with an expansion, because the combat on its own just isn't doing it. And that's a real shame. I can see a lot of reasons for why that's true as well. I think the pace is too high. I think the enemies on an individual basis aren't interesting enough and so on. But that's not necessarily an End of Dragons specific discussion. Anyway, yeah, at the end of the Icebrood saga, it will line up with the Day of the Tengu. Some kind of announcement for the expansion would line up really well there, especially because that would be about a year since our first teaser trailer, which is presumably around when they started working on it somewhere-ish. So fingers crossed, but it still may be a bit of a wait. Thanks very much for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed. Drop any comments you like down below. We'll be still on the big lore topic for the next time, and have a great evening, everybody. Ta-ta for now. Oh, don't forget the guild's still recruiting, still getting several mails a day. You can hit the link to the description in the Discord in the description to figure out how to get in. The more the merrier for the eggs pack.